Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for September through December. Over the last 30 days, we've seen very warm conditions across all of the West, along with very dry conditions. Very dry conditions continue over the southern and eastern half of the Great Basin into the southwest and southern California, since we have not seen really any monsoon moisture move up and develop into the southwest or Great Basin. So very dry conditions continue over southern and eastern areas, with only very spotty precipitation associated with thunderstorm activity over western and northern areas. Since the fall of 2019, we have seen generally below normal precipitation across all of Nevada and Utah into southern Idaho. The only areas that saw above normal precipitation were in the far southern areas of Nevada into far southwest Utah and parts of the Arizona Strip. This was mainly for precipitation that occurred early last winter and into the spring months. We also saw near normal precipitation going through the spring across parts of southwest and central Idaho. We do still have carryover grass crop to deal with from the fall and winter of 2018 to 2019 across parts of Nevada and into Utah and parts of the Arizona Strip in the lower elevations, also into far southern Idaho. This grass crop will come into play as we go into the fall months and we see increased cold fronts bring windy conditions after very dry conditions occurred this summer. Looking at our grass fuel loading experimental product, you can see where those grasses have been above normal, and this is just accounting for the carryover going into this fire season. So generally over southern and eastern portions of Nevada into western Utah and parts of the Arizona Strip is where we are seeing that carryover continue. Looking at our soil moistures, we've seen very dry conditions, so it's no surprise that our soil moisture is very low for the time of year across Utah, into eastern Nevada, and across western Nevada into California. Looking at our evaporative demand drought index, and you can see very dry conditions with the category 3 and 4 drought over much of eastern Nevada into southern and eastern Utah and the Arizona Strip, and also over parts of western and northern Nevada. This also extends into California and Arizona and parts of New Mexico and Colorado. Again, with the absence of the monsoon this year, very dry conditions continue across much of the West. Looking at our drought monitor for our longer-term drought, you can see generally extreme drought over eastern Nevada into parts of southern Nevada, the Arizona Strip, and Utah. We are not expected to see any improvement to this drought anytime in the near future, as warm and dry conditions will continue heading into September. Looking at our current live fuel moisture up in Idaho, eastern Nevada, and Utah, looking at our sagebrush fuel moisture, you can see we are seeing near record low conditions in our sagebrush fuel moisture for the time of year. And this is representative going into eastern and southern Nevada as well. Looking at western Nevada, this is 4,000-hour fuel moisture, so our heavier timber fuels are experiencing very dry conditions and near record low fuel moisture as well. This is representative not only of western Nevada into the Sierra, but we're also seeing these larger fuel moisture, significant dry conditions over eastern and southern Nevada and also into Utah. Again, with the lack of monsoon moisture, all of our fuels are very critical for the time of year. Looking at our current ERCs for August 31st, and you can see still, even with some cooler weather that moved through with cold fronts dropping down from the north late in August, we are still seeing ERCs that are above the 90th to 97th percentile for the time of year across Utah into eastern Nevada. Further north, again, we did see some improvement with some moisture and cooler temperatures that dropped south into central Idaho, but the rest of southern Idaho into western and northern Nevada still remains critical with ERCs that are near the 80th percentile, and we will see these ERCs continue to rise going into September. 10-hour fuel moisture is still very low across much of Nevada and Utah. And 100-hour fuel moisture, again, still very critical across much of Nevada into western and central Utah. Very similar conditions with 1,000-hour fuel moisture. We also still have a fuels and fire behavior advisory in effect for eastern and southern Nevada across all of Utah and parts of the Arizona Strip. This has been in effect since July with the lack of monsoon moisture, and fuels have just continued to get more critical throughout the month of August. Our current large incidents are indicated here, again, very active in areas around the periphery of the Great Basin. The Great Basin overall has quieted down fire potential-wise overall, but again, we are going to continue to see very warm and dry conditions heading into the first half of September, so still we should be on high alert across the Great Basin. And we've continued to see smoke impacts across western and northern sides of the Great Basin because of wildfires to our west, and this will continue as long as these fires are active. So now that we've looked at the recent conditions, we'll look at what we have ahead, looking at La Nina and El Nino. Currently, we are in a state of neutral across when we've been in neutral conditions for some time. Looking at a lot of the forecast models indicated by each of these lines, you can see generally we will likely stay in the neutral condition or even drop with some cooling later this year, potentially developing a weak La Nina. So we will continue to monitor that as we go into the future. Now looking at some of our outlooks, the 8 to 14 day outlook. This takes us from September 8th through the 14th, showing very warm conditions and drier conditions expected across the Great Basin. We will have a strong ridge of high pressure that will be building into the west, and this will bring very warm temperatures, and some areas may even see some record temperatures heading into the early part of September with dry conditions. So the rest of September still looks generally warm and dry. However, we may start to see some cold fronts drop down from the north, mainly impacting northern and eastern sides of the Great Basin, which could potentially bring some windier conditions, but right now we're not looking for any significant moisture to impact the region. Looking at the extended outlook from October through December, and generally just still looking at warm and dry conditions, especially for southern areas, we will start to see some moisture dropping down from the north with cold fronts going into the fall, mainly impacting the northern side of the Great Basin. So putting all this together, and for September, we will continue to see above normal fire potential across much of the region. Even into the far south, we may see above normal conditions, but really it's in areas where we have significantly dry fuel moistures and also where we have that carryover fine fuel, and any new growth we saw earlier this spring will become a factor as we move through the fall and we start seeing some gustier winds with cold fronts, and also a little bit more recreating as temperatures cool. We could see the potential for increased human starts and also increased spread with our significantly dry fuel conditions. As we move later in the month towards October and November, we likely will see just a more natural decline of fire potential. Again, we're not looking for any big season-ending event at this time with moisture, but we will see shorter days, cooler nights, and generally a slow decline of fire season heading into October and November at the present time. That concludes our briefing for this month. Check back in early October for the next monthly and seasonal outlook.